Hi everybody, Phil Tenaya here for The Matrix Goes to School, and this video is about trouble learning, the stuff that gets in the way, and what we can do about it. Now those of us who are in the business of educating and guiding young people, which includes parents and guardians, spend a lot of our time trying to make a difference leading young people toward successful outcomes and valued lives. Now often learning comes easy, but there are also many times when it is upsetting or troubling. Now, trouble learning that shows up in our students or ourselves can get in the way. And it can also show up anytime we're trying to move toward who or what is important to us. Now, when we use the matrix diagram here, we are in the process of noticing what we're doing. And we're noticing what's going on with our behaviors, what we're doing with them. We're noticing what's showing up inside of us. And we are noticing what we're doing to move toward who or what's important. And or we may be noticing that we're doing something to move away from stuff that shows up inside of us that we don't want. Now, when we can do all of this, we are more psychologically flexible and we're better able to navigate through whatever comes our way, even when that stuff is troubling. Now, it seems that one way or another, what we're up to is we are in the business of influencing. Okay, so I'm going to put that down here. Influence is the name of the game here. And for that would mean for most of us that we're using words and we're using actions to influence our learners. Now, learning is a natural process and it begins up here with the five senses. We experience the world through them, and then these experiences come down inside of us and show up inside of us. So, for example, before a child enters a classroom, or an adult for that matter, they have mastered tons of simple and complex sounds, which are showing up on the outside, which we call language, which is what shows up inside of us when those sounds come down and they are transformed into language. And then we use that in order to get our needs met. And all of this happens with no formal instruction other than lots of experience, trial, and error. Now, this language here allows us to attach labels to our internal experiences, which, of course, we are born hardwired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. And our experiential learning is kind of what allows us to have this rich inner landscape down here where that experiential learning gets transformed by the use of these symbols and the words into feelings and different sensations and memories, which we put all kinds of different labels on, and kind of pointing to stuff that's wanted and stuff that's unwanted. Now, the trouble learning stuff doesn't feel good, and what can happen here is we can spend lots of time struggling with it. So I started thinking about the story of Helen Keller, who was deprived of sight and sound and speech at a young age. Her early experiences were filled with troubled learning and had really narrowed her world and her actions until her teacher, Annie Sullivan, showed up. Now, Annie had some trouble learning of her own. Helen's internal world, though, was forever transformed when Annie Sullivan poured some liquid on Helen's hands and used sign language, signing into her hands these symbols, W-A-T-E-R. And what happened was those symbols showed up inside of Helen, and she came to associate this word, water, with that experience, and that opened her up to make all kinds of connections, and she went on to pursue a valued and a vital life, troubled learning and all. Now, we all experience things in life that are troubling. Things don't always go our way. People don't always treat us well. There are obstacles out there that show up and get in our way. We try things out, and sometimes they work, and sometimes they don't work. This is the kind of learning that we don't like down here, and we try to move away from. Now, Annie and Helen had to struggle quite a bit before they got the hang of it. Lots and lots of trial and error. Some lessons then are much harder to learn than others. Now, lots of stuff can show up inside of us on the way to becoming the person that we want to be. It can be both wonderful and it can be troubling. Many of our students have troubled stories they carry around inside of them. And since everyone learns, they may have learned to avoid what is uncomfortable. So they will go up here and they will do behaviors to avoid that trouble learning. And a little moving away can work in the short run and be very helpful. Too much, though, and you can kind of lose your way and can feel pretty stuck. Learning then becomes more and more troubling and something to be avoided more and more frequently. So for some of our students, it can feel as if they are their troubled learning or their troubled stories. And they kind of walk around with the I am this stuff right here. And they begin to lose contact with this who and what's important to them. Now, had Annie gotten lost in Helen's story, things may have turned out much differently for Helen. And yet, for ourselves, we may find ourselves in the presence of someone, a learner perhaps, who is holding on tightly to this trouble learning stuck story in their heads. So what do? Now, from my perspective, and others I know, we return to the basic learning model using the process of the matrix. I very carefully notice what is going on outside of me and inside of me. I notice what I am doing in the moment with the troubled learner. I notice if I have a stuck story that's showing up inside of me that I may be trying to move away from. Now, the stuck story that may often show up is something that goes like, I don't know what to do. And that thought will often pop up in me. And then I will notice what I do next. And I can also notice my stuck story and if what I am doing is helping me to go up here, and what I'm going to try and do is add some value to the situation. And when I'm doing that, I'm also noticing is now does it feel more or less sticky to me. I then repeat this as often as needed, since experience tells me that there are no guarantees what we are moving toward. We may get there and we may not get there. There are no guarantees. And that whatever happens, though, we will always be doing something next, either a toward move or an away move. Now, paying attention to what we do next can really help us keep this learning stuff going for both ourselves and our stuck learners. So it's like when you're preparing for takeoff and you're on the plane, on the runway, and you're taxiing out and you're sitting next to your child or someone you're responsible for, and the flight attendant announces, in the event of an emergency or if the cabin loses pressure, oxygen masks will drop down from the compartments above you. Put yours on first. Now, using the matrix will definitely help you keep breathing when trouble learning shows up in either you or others. And it will help you notice moves that work and moves that don't. So, happy noticing.